we are now resuming, and we will be more or less starting from where we left off. We want to apologize for the technical difficulties that we had, and just to let you know that these things do happen, and they're outside of our control, but nevertheless, we are going to keep and preserve the momentum with which we started. And so once you are logged on, feel free to come back in. You can join the stream again. As I said before, if you have any questions, feel free to text them, to text those questions to either on Facebook or on YouTube. Send us those questions so that we can respond to anything that you may have, anything you may want to know. All right, so continuing in our stream of questions, coming back to you, Sister Jocelyn, with our question on why do different financial institutions have different interest rates?
Each financial institution invests its funds differently and obtains deposits from different sources at different costs. So, and each one has its measure of internal expenses by which it can determine at what rate it must lend its funds at and at what rate it's good to take funds in. So each financial institution, whether they are commercial banks or credit unions, their funding sources are different, with the costs related to those funding are going to be different. And therefore, that's the basic reason why rates are different, both on the deposit side and on the lending side. For example, in a very fluid economy, you would find that interest rates, both on the deposit side and on the lending side, are going to be low, regardless of which institution you are dealing with.
Okay.
They may not be the similar rate, but they are going to be relatively low. So that's the underlying reasons for the differences in financial institution rates amongst themselves.
Okay, all right, good to know, because I believe that is a question that many persons may have, just as they go more or less what I would call lending shopping. When they go, they want to try different financial institutions to see who has the best rates. They may shop around it. So thank you for answering that. Go ahead.
Also, liquidity, their level of liquidity has a lot to do with it also.
Okay. So the more liquid the organization is, understood. Great. On the area of then lending and borrowing money, things of that nature, should a person get a line of credit, a credit card, or a loan?
I'll take that one. Thank you for the question. It all depends on the purpose of what you're borrowing funds for. And because there are three different products, and you have to look at it. Generally, a line of credit, banking institutions may call them overdrafts or line of credits.
Okay.
But basically, it is an operating account. So what happens is, let's say you get a line of credit, $5,000. The intention is that account, it may reach a high of 5,000, but it's expected to come down monthly. So you're either constantly putting funds in that account, or your monthly salary is big enough to show what they call a fluctuation in the limit from high to low and back up, and so it's for like daily expenses and ongoing expenses. Credit cards tend to carry the highest interest rates. Most credit cards, I believe, right now are around 22, 24%. Wow. Some may be even higher. So a credit card is something that if you take, you don't want to be constantly using it, and you want to make sure that you can at least, well, if you're just paying the minimum, you're still paying interest, but you're trying to see if you can pay off what you incur, what debts you put on it over say the 30-day period that they give you to pay it off in. A loan now generally comes for a specific item. You want to buy a car, a fridge, some appliance, something. So you know an amount. You're going to pay back a stipulated monthly payment that is not going to vary. So like say you're buying a car, you know, well, I got to pay $500 a month for that car. So now you're defining what your monthly payment is, as opposed to an overdraft or a line of credit, which, you know, will fluctuate over the period of time.
Gotcha. Thank you so very much for answering that. I've heard of these differences, you know, in terms of, you know, having the line of credit card, loan, but as you mentioned, the specificity between them, you know, I was able to understand, and I'm sure others watching were able to understand, you know, the difference in the use of them and which one you would go for. So let's say, for example, I'm just I'm taking a trip overseas and I will be spending money and what's not. That would be where I would more so use a credit card, you would say.
Right. Yes.
Right. But if I want to build a house or start a business.
Yes, that's where you would be going for a loan, and well, you said a house, so it may be even a mortgage.
Right. Okay.
Longer terms, yes.
And is there a specific difference between, or is there a major difference between a loan and a mortgage? Can you?
Yes. Well, a mortgage is usually for a residence, and you're either buying or building a house.
Right.
And invariably, mortgages will run 20, 25 years. Some, I think, even run as much as 30 years now.
Okay.
But, so it is for a specific time. A loan is generally a shorter term. You may get 3, 5, maybe 7 years max.
Okay.
For loans, and a loan is for something smaller, say a car, you know, something. You may even person that likes to do it every year. You try to make sure it can be paid off in a 12-month period, and you know, so you're not running debt into debt, so to speak. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Okay. Good to know. Good to know. I will have some more questions concerning loans in a brief moment. But my next question is speaking to the, you know, saving money aspect. So if I want to save money for a venture, should I open a saving account, fixed deposit account, or do I invest it?
Good evening, Minister Russell, and thank you and People's Cathedral for having me. I will try to answer this one.
Okay.
Basically, when you're saving for a venture, you really need to understand the nature of the venture, because it have different terms. So for instance, if I know that when I put in the funds for the venture, I'm going to need it fairly regularly, I would use a savings account, because a savings account is the most liquid account that you have, which means that it's ready cash. So although it's an account with an institution, whether it be a credit union or a bank, I have access to those funds. So if I need to pay for something, then I can do that.
Okay.
A fixed deposit, though, is for a specific term. So you will hear a person doing a fixed deposit for 6 months, for 12 months, 2 years, even 5 years. So if you know that your venture, you are going to require the money within those other time horizons, it might be better to utilize those, because then you're earning a higher amount of interest. So the savings account, as we can see nowadays, especially with the banking institution, you have nil almost in terms of any interest rate. But at least if you're saving on a fixed deposit, you can get something on your money.
Okay.
An investment in a venture, though, is something different. Now, this is where you're trying to invest in it for the longer term. But you got to realize that there's a risk in doing that, because the money that you invested, you can lose it. Whereas the other two, you retain your funds and you spend it as and when you want. Once you invest money in a venture, it's all depend depending on how well the venture does, whether you're going to get back your money or not. So basically, in investing in that, be if I decide to buy a piece of land and I want to work it for agricultural purposes, I've sunk the money into the land, I'm working it, and I'm selling my produce. Now, my return is really in terms of the sales that I've defined for that produce. Now, if I am doing good in terms of the sales, well, yes, I'm getting back my money. But if something happens, like there's rain that floods out the field, or for instance, as we know, sometimes persons come and try to steal some of your produce. If you can't get it to market, you can't get back your money. So with the venture like that, at least you can earn a higher return, much higher than the fixed deposit or even the savings account. But there's always the risk that you would lose it. And it's all about risk. Are you willing to take the risk at that point in time? So all three are good options, but it just depends on what you want to do at the particular time. You have to have a plan in mind.
Okay. Duly noted. Duly noted. Thank you so very much for that. So my question to you would be, when planning for a venture, should I have a budget?
Yes. Should always have a budget. Because you don't know what you're going to happen to you during the period, and especially if you're doing it, let's say you're doing it for a year or 2 years. Understand where your sources of income are coming from, whether it is a salary, if you're working for a salary, if you're going to be putting that down, or if it is from a venture that you've invested in and you're expecting to get X amount when the month comes. But you need to understand what your sources of income will be, but also what your expenditure will also be, because the income is what is going to meet or satisfy the expenditure that you have to give out. And you don't want to be in a situation where you are spending more than you have. So the savings there is to help you to get over that period. Always look to do a budget, because then you know what your costs are, you know what your income stream would look like, and you also will be able to identify what periods you may have a shortfall in, and so from more expenses than I have income. Okay.
Duly noted. Duly noted. I have another question to tag on to that. What should I look for? Because let me before you answer, brother Dwayne, investment. Coming up, you would hear save, spend, invest, save, spend, invest, and now over the past year, 2 years, we've seen a lot of opportunities to invest, whether you can do crowdfunding or crowdsourcing, and everybody what we consider the modern version of the meeting term, where people put their money into this thing, and persons will get some kind of buyout, but you have to bring somebody else with you and that kind of stuff, and they're calling these investment opportunities, and they've been hot over the past couple of years. And so I'm asking this question, and I know it's on my list of questions to ask. And I'm asking this not just for me personally, but for others who may be watching, and they're saying, I do want to invest. I want my money to have some kind of return on it. But what should I look for when deciding on an investment, and how would I know if it's a good investment or not? And if you can give any examples of where young persons as well too, can invest, that would be important.
Well, first thing in understanding any investment is being aware that there's always a risk that you can lose the funds that you're putting in.
Right.
Okay. What or how much risk are you willing to undertake? That is key in terms of doing any investment.
Right.
The other aspect that you need to look at is, how long would you want to invest these funds for? Again, I go back to the venture we talked about earlier in terms of savings. Do I want to do it for a long period of time? Am I willing to do it for a long period of time? And for instance, we always hear nowadays things like, for retirement, person saving for retirement. The further you are away from retirement, the longer you can afford to have funds invested for, and the more risk you can take. Because ultimately, if there are ups and downs with the investment, more often than not, it tends to be able to rebound over a long period of time. If your time horizon, however, is shorter, you want to invest in something that is going to give you more what we call liquidity. Like how I mentioned earlier, you're really putting it in because you expect that you're going to get some cash out of it in the short term.
Right.
Things that people look at like that nowadays would be things like mutual funds, for instance. We look at a mutual fund as something that they can invest in the short term, although it may have different types of mutual funds, but ultimately they feel when they're ready to get back their funds, they can get them back. And the risk is not as high as something like that. Whereas if I'm investing in a share of or stock of a company, you really need to be investing for the long term because the company can go through cycles where everything can be going good,
right,
or it could be going bad. But ultimately, what you want to be able to do when you're investing in anything is, first principle, understand what you are getting into.
Okay.
I'm going to say that it is a case of understanding what the company is trying to do, understanding who are the principals involved, what are their expertise in doing the work that they say that they're putting out there. Do they have a track record in terms of doing good investments? Although they always tell you your past experience does not tell you what will happen in the future, but at least it can help you understand if this particular venture can make money or not.
Right.
But the key thing though is understanding the risks when you're going into the investment. That's what I would say.
Perfect. Thank you so very much for answering that, because I do know that that is a question that others may have as well. All right, so we talked about investment. For those of you who are watching and you are listening into the conversation, you have some questions, please feel free to just mention them. You can put them in the comments. I'm here looking as well, so that if you have any questions that I will be able to ask our distinguished panel tonight. I want to continue our questions, tapping back now to the area of loans. Brother Peter, I want to ask you, what should someone consider when applying for a loan, and when should they apply for said loan? What should they consider when applying for a loan, and when should they apply for such a loan?
Well, I think one of the first things you need to do is ask yourself, how much money do I need? For if it's buying something, land, and a plans, car, whatever it is you're doing, a project, something, how much do I need?
Right.
Secondly, you probably need to ask yourself too, how much can I afford to pay monthly? Because if what you find is going to be way out of your league or limit, or come back to, as Glenn said, your budget,
right,
because you should have a budget to know what you have available to use. Yeah, how much can I afford to pay monthly? You will need financial institutions, credit unions, usually require job letter, ask you for a pro forma invoice on the item that you're purchasing, so they can see, if you go and tell them you want a loan for 10,000, that whatever it is you're buying costs at least 10,000 or more. I think you also need to look at your net worth, what you own, and what you owe. So in other words, when you go to a bank, usually they may ask you to fill out a form of different things like so they get an idea of your net worth.
Yes.
Again, a thought to be collateral. What are you giving a collateral for this loan? Invariably, if it's a car or a house, you may get a mortgage or a loan, bill of sale on the car. If it is something smaller, do you already have a savings with that institution that can be held, or just know what is the collateral for the loan. You should also know if there are any fees associated with the loan. If you have to do a bill of sale, again, a mortgage, do the bank or the credit union charge you any credit fees for processing the loan and so forth. Going back to something you said earlier about your job letter, some people may wonder, well, why they want. Sometimes too, that helps the individual that's looking at your application to see, like, you know, how long you've been working.
Right.
You know, in other words, do you have a steady job, steady income, or you keep shifting jobs? You know, because these are some indicators that it may not be a loan that they may want to enter in. You know, if they consider the person's not steady in say job work. When you asked it too about when should I apply for a loan? My past experience in the bank, and I know I think Jocelyn could answer that as well. Somebody will come to you maybe Monday and say, I need a loan to get XYZ. I need it by Friday or even before that. You know, so don't rush at the last moment, because you have to understand the financial institution's process in doing your application, because they have to go to a committee or a board or, you know, some division to approve it. That may take times. The individual you go to has to maybe do some write-up, or, well, in this modern day, use computer and type up an application for it. And then you have to, right, so that goes like, how soon do I need the funds? So you give yourself some sort of time, and then get an idea of the timing of delivery of those funds from the financial institution, as I said, you know, because you don't know what their process is in reviewing your application and approving it.
Okay. Good stuff. Good stuff. I really do appreciate that, because I know in a time like this, persons may say, well, you know, it's the end of the year, it's Christmas coming up, and I might need to take out a loan, and they might be looking for the loan to come, let's say Christmas Eve, or at least just before Christmas Day, so they can go and do their Christmas shopping. We would advise them not to go the Monday before Christmas or the, you know, just a couple of days before Christmas to ask for a loan. As a big no-no, they would need to go as early as probably next week and start to ask those questions. So thank you for answering those questions. I know that, and Sister Jocelyn would probably may have had this question, but in terms of the documents required for getting a loan, you started to highlight that as well to Brother Peter, in terms of pay slips, proof of address. I do know that it is included in that we would have the job letter and filling out the form, getting that information. As you said, a pro forma, if the person is buying a particular type of thing, they would have an invoice, say stating the amount of the item. Am I missing anything, any other documents that persons may need?
Yeah. Given the requirements, we will have to do credit searches. We have to do investigation with regards to your credit rating through credit bureaus. So that process could take a while, and that process may reveal information that may not be in your favor in terms of your ability to handle a higher level of debt. Or in terms, or because a disclosure might be made there with regards to how you handled a previous debt that may have not been paid as was scheduled or even written off. Because sometimes folks think that because their loans are written off, it's scotch-free, but it tarnishes your credit rating, and it could impact your ability to borrow.
Interesting. Okay. So let me ask you this follow-up question then to you then, Sister Jocelyn. What is a credit score or credit rating? Let's say I've never heard this before. I've seen it on TV and ads. You know, you watch American TV and they see them talk about credit score, and you need to go to this place. And some people might think. So what is a credit score or a credit rating?
Okay, in Barbados, bankers and lenders talk about credit score.
Mm-hmm.
What
Right.
the borrowers may not be talking about credit score, but the bankers and other lenders, whoever they are, talk
Right.
about credit score. A credit score is a report sourced from a credit bureau,
Mm-hmm.
and we have credit bureaus in Barbados that assess the scoring, and it's based on one's credit history,
Right.
the number of borrowing accounts, the total levels of debt, the borrower's repayment history. That's important. It is used to decide whether you are creditworthy or not, right? In respect to securing, for example, a mortgage, a credit card, a vehicular loan, overdraft, and it may highly influence also the rate of interest, whether you get a preferential rate if you have an excellent credit score, or otherwise influence the rate of interest that is being charged on your account. And it can also influence the type of security that would be demanded in order to feel, or the lender to feel safe.
Right.
So your credit score is essentially a picture of you as a lending risk. Are you a good lending risk or not such a good lending risk, right? So in applying for the loan, it is therefore essential that you are aware of what your history is out there with other lenders, right? Some of which you don't think are in the credit bureau, but they are there because it's a safe space. And so
Right.
we have to be mindful of it, that even though you come to the bank or the credit union to borrow, and you may say that there are no loans, if we investigate, we may find there are loans, either written off or in arrears or excellent repayment history. So those,
Our credit score and our credit
yeah,
rating, because that's my
yeah,
follow-up question to you. If
yes.
someone is saying, well, I don't know what my credit rating is or credit score is like, but I want to make sure it's in good standing.
Okay. If that is the case, and we have the mechanism for calculating it, and you are honest with your information base, then that credit score can be determined for you. It's not something that is difficult, and that's how commercial banks essentially and the larger credit unions operate on the basis of your credit. You've been a member for 10 or 15 years. Do you have a good credit rating, a good credit score?
Right. Okay. Good stuff. Good stuff. But tapping back to you, Brother Peter, how do we manage debt? How should someone manage debt?
In managing that, I think you have to, one, sort of take a step back, take account of your accounts or debts, know how much you owe, compare what you earn, what you owe, what you spend. You look for opportunities to consolidate, because invariably, if you got 3 or 4 loans around the place, $400 a month.
Right.
If you get one institution that will agree to consolidate your debt, you may end up only paying $275 or something like that. So that way you look for those opportunities to consolidate.
Right.
To effectively manage debt too, I think you have to be honest about your spending habits, because there's some people, oh, I gotta have this, I gotta have this. And you have to, if you will, your wants and your needs.
Right.
Say, what do I really need, or is it just a want?
Right.
Yeah. Again, you have to, a budget is always a good thing to do. Make a budget.
Okay.
And then you can determine whether you can afford to make extra payments, or you may want to do, if you're not making extra payments, then you want to build, if you want to call it an emergency fund. You may put a savings. Well, I can afford to put $50 or $100 a month aside for emergencies.
Right.
And then you can use that to fall back on. But again, doing things like that takes discipline,
Okay.
you know, because if you don't discipline yourself, then you will always fall back into the trap of, oh, everything you see you want, or you got to buy this.
So true.
Another good way to manage your debt is try to pay your debts on time.
Yeah.
When they become due.
Mm-hmm.
Don't let them build up.
Right.
And by doing that too, you determine a debt reduction strategy. What debt can I eliminate now, you know? And does it make sense to pay this one off first, and, you know, that you will have funds to do it.
Okay. So we are managing debt then, and thank you for answering that. We're managing debt. My follow-up question to that would be, how can someone improve their cash flow? So you talked about consolidating debts so that, you know, you have a little more money, you know, to be able to work with, or, you know, you minimize how much debt you have, or you accumulate when the month comes or the year comes. But while we're doing that,
again, it can improve your income. And then this second way is how expensive. Do either one, improve your income.
What's not.